Hey guys, welcome back to my watercolor channel, and today we are painting a path, and this path is in Utsjoki, so it's close to the between the river and the village. We actually haven't been walking there before, but my husband discovered with his brother who is living there those different paths there, and it was a beautiful day when we went walking and we took some nice pictures there as well. So I thought I painted and added a lot of green, although we have already autumn and the green is slightly disappearing. But yes, I enjoyed the process when adding every single detail. So have a look and let's get started. Hey, so here's my little painting of the path in Utsjoki where everything has been nicely green still, but it was so dry that it actually started to become ruska, so it means that the leaves were changing its colors to yellow quite easily. And yeah, we could feel already that the autumn was coming as such, but we were quite lucky that it was relatively warm at this point. And my painting here, I start with the sky, so I think still it is quite a challenge to do a painting where it contains so many different elements such as trees, especially as it can be quite a fatal for painting, but it can be quite overwhelming to add too many trees, too much detail in a watercolor painting. Is especially if those trees are a little bit in the distance, it's more recommendable to make it to use a rather loose style. And I start to add very light colors first because it gives me room to work on it later on, and I can see where I can add more contrast, so it's not as overwhelming when adding immediately very strong layers. Although I do have a photo, I try to be a little bit more freestyle, so I will not every single tree on there as such, but I do want to create a nice path where I use a lot of green color. So I have added lemon yellow and ultramarine blue as such to make this bright color, and you can use of course some turquoise blue as to make as such, because then the green color becomes even brighter. Then I use the same colors basically to create a much darker green, so having a lot of ultramarine blue and then a little bit less of the lemon yellow. It is rather, I would rather use a big brush when starting with the painting, because then it's kind of like covering a bit of the white paper, and especially using here wet to wet, giving here much more opportunity. The upper half of the paper is still wet, so I wetted it again, so I waited that everything has dried, and then I kind of like looked a little bit on the look at the photo, so what's going on there, and then I continue with the second layer. So now I'm using a small brush, and I try to add a much stronger contrast. So I'm using the same colors, but in this case they contain much more pigments, so they are a bit stronger, and they don't contain as much water anymore. So I really want that they come through. And the reason why I use the wet to wet technique is basically so that it still kind of remains blurry, and for example adding edges and much more details. So I will do it in later on, but I rather have at this point still rather blurry edges and just giving a rather structure there. Now I let it dry completely again, and I start with much more details. So I have here a middle-sized brush and I use green, and I look at my photo where are the stems of the tree and where are the tree crowns and the leaves. So I want a little bit to add a shadow in between and around so that the first layer comes through quite nicely. And actually takes a while to add the color to the paper here because it's much more detailed work. And in between I do have different shades of green prepared, so I can play a little bit around, and I can connect those shades as well. So a little bit it's not as boring, and it looks actually much nicer if the wet areas are connected with each other. So I'm using a little bit of light layers which are not very strong in color and don't contain so much pigments, and then I have much stronger greens. And here I try to add basically the heels, so I try not to make it as straight as possible. And you can see here as well that I have a combination of light layers and then adding much more stronger paint, such as here, and then it's spreading really nicely. A little bit closer up, I continue with the entire painting as such, so it will take a while and I have a little bit of speed on. But this is what I really like about the watercolors. It's a bit spreading the water and the paint and kind of creating of a translucent layer on the top. So I really like to do that, although I have previously used quite a lot of wet to wet and having many times just one layer ready and try to work with that. But the last holiday in Utsjoki was really nice, and it has been much warmer around this time, so we started off in the middle of August to get there. The reason why is that it has been quite warm and we don't have a very good air conditioning within the car, so the dogs and us don't like it very much to be in a hot car. And the weather there was as well very nice, so it actually hasn't been too hot, and we had a lot of sunny days as well as some of the rainy days. But we did many small hikes in between, so there's always something to discover. For example, such as this little path. So as I have told you before in my introduction, my husband and his brother went for a small biking tour, and they did not really want to go into the tundra as such, so they explored the areas in between, and this path is very close to the Utsjoki city center, so it's actually a city center, village center, so it is around the river. And it was nice to go around with the dogs. The hike itself, or the walk itself, wasn't that long, but it was the scenery was quite amazing. And my dogs are always quite happy to walk around, especially as the reindeers are roaming there quite freely. We did meet at the end a little bit of two reindeers which were further away, so my younger dog of course got a bit crazy. My older dog is much more of a bird dog, so she's not very interested in a game, and for her it's not that exciting. In my painting I have added a little bit of reddish colors because I have a lot of green, so this reddish colors gives a nice focal point, and it's good to mix some orange. I used some of the yellow ochre and as well of the cadmium red. So as you can see now, I use it as well to create a little bit of a darker grayish green. And while the paper is still wet, I still add some darker spots. So I try not to overuse too many different colors, and I really like the way yellow ochre behaves. There are so many different possibilities to create different colors, such as really nice orange and then have this olive green. I use a smaller brush now, so I start to add much more details, but I really try to look that there is some space in between such as the grass stem, so it's basically like the light would shine onto this area. I do have a big tree, so I try to work there, and I try to use much more of a brighter color, and having here as well some green, different shades of green. I use a bigger brush because because it's basically a larger paper, and I don't want to waste too much time onto the details, and it's actually not as much worth it to add too many details, or it's not my style to do so. For example, I've seen many Chinese painters as well as Japanese painters who add quite detailed leaves there, but I think for me it's a bit too challenging, and yes, I prefer it this way, so I rather play with the ponds of water. I add here a bit more contrast, but my pigments are not as strong, so it's a bit going under. But I tried to sustain basically the bright colors, although around the edges I add a little bit of a darker green. And I'm pressing the brush and then move it around, so it's a bit of a dry brush technique in order to create the different leaves. I have again waited till everything has dried, so now I really focus on the stems of the trees. What I have done here is basically I wetted the main stems, so there's a tree right at the front, and I wet it with water. Now I give a nice darker colors to it, made out of indigo blue as well as of Payne's grey, and they should contain a lot of pigments. As well, when adding those spots, it's a little bit trying to guide them that they create a roundness, because the trees obviously are round, that it's not just a spot on spot, and adding carefully the branches at the top. In my past, I had quite a few difficulties in adding branches to make too many, and again, that can feel a bit overwhelming as well. I add here to the stem of the, or to the trunk, not stem, trunk of the tree, some yellow ochre. So having a really nice colors, different colors. And as well, I continue with the second tree. So I wanted to finish the first trunk and then adding the second one, so I have a little bit more time and I can just focus on one thing. Why I don't need to rush to get everything done while the paper is still wet, and this paper can dry quite fast. But yes, I don't want to have too much of the details on the trunk either. Basically, continue to work on the branches. Those are tundra birches, so I'm not sure if it's birches as such, but they are much smaller trees, and they are very low or small because in the tundra itself there aren't that many trees as such, but if they grow they are very low. Although these ones were a little bit higher as they are growing around the river. And then adding some structure to the trunk with a much smaller brush, and then as well as a few branches with a really small brush, and then emphasizing a little bit of the side of the trunks, and then adding some shadows so that it doesn't look too empty. So I mix a little bit of blue grayish colors as well as adding more shadows to the path, or to not to the path, to the side bushes. So what's growing there, it's very likely to be, for example, lingonberry brushes and blueberry bushes as well, but some different kind of plants. And then adding a little bit further away some trunks to the trees as well. It's quite important to have them in different directions and not so straight, so it gives a bit movement to the painting, and then adding some structure to the path. And it's like basically some small work, and then just emphasizing certain areas. Because there was another tree, just adding it there. And then also structure to the trunk. because there's so much going on in the painting. I didn't want to add too many details, but just focusing that where are the branches of the tree, and then a little bit what can I emphasize, where are the shadows within the painting. But basically that was it. So thank you for watching, and okay, so it was a little bit of a longer video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway, and I hope you enjoyed painting it with me. So I see you in my next video, and until then, bye.